You have walked over one of these. You just didn't know it. Maybe it was outside a chain store with a coffee going cold in your hand. Maybe you were waiting for a bus or halfway through a sentence on the phone. And the whole time, your feet were a few inches above a room that has not changed since the 1300s. Up here, Britain never stops editing itself. A new shopfront goes in. Fresh tarmac gets poured. Another century is laid down on top of the last one, over and over, until the medieval town is sanded clean away and nothing original is left to touch. That is what happens on the surface. That is the rule. But down there, under the pavement you are standing on right now, the Middle Ages are still sitting in the dark, exactly where the people who cut them set down their tools, straightened up, and climbed back into the light for the last time. These are 9 streets in Britain with real medieval tunnels, passages and cellars beneath them. Every single one is still there. Every single one you can still go down into today. And I'm going to make you one promise because it matters more than anything else on this list. Everything here is real. And the second a story turns out to be only a story, a legend, a rumour, a good tale with no evidence holding it up, I will stop and say so out loud. No tricks. No pretending a myth is a fact just because it sounds better. We are counting down from 9 to 1. From a street you would walk past without a second glance, all the way to a passage where a teenage king climbed up through solid rock in total darkness to take back a throne that had been stolen from him. By the time we get there, medieval England is going to stop being a phrase from a schoolbook. It is going to become a temperature, a smell, a thing you can put your hand flat against. So take a good breath of this warm modern air while you still can. We are going under. Entry 9, Exeter. Beneath the High Street, Devon. We start gently, on an ordinary shopping street, in a cathedral city in the southwest of England, between the sort of chain stores you would find in any town in the country. There is a plain door near Exeter's High Street. You step through it, go down a short flight of steps, and the modern world simply switches off. The traffic noise thins to nothing. The air turns cold and damp, the particular damp of a place the sun has never once reached, and you are standing in a narrow, stone-vaulted tunnel that was cut in the 14th century. Here is the thing about these tunnels, and it is easy to miss because it is so practical. They were not dug for treasure or for hiding or for escape. They were dug for plumbing. Medieval Exeter needed clean drinking water inside its walls, and the good springs were outside the city. So the citizens ran lead pipes underground to carry that water in. But lead pipes leak, and digging up a busy street every time a pipe sprang a leak was a nightmare. The same nightmare we still have today. So the people of Exeter did something clever. Instead of just burying the pipe, they built a stone tunnel big enough for a person to climb inside. Dig it once, and forever after a workman could crawl down and fix the leak without tearing the street apart above him. According to Exeter City Council, who run the site, the earliest water conduit here goes back to 1226, and the vaulted passages you actually walk through are largely 14th century. This is genuine medieval infrastructure, a water main you can stand inside. And a historian at the University of Southampton, Professor Mark Stoyle, wrote an entire book on the medieval plumbers of Exeter. Real, named men, drawn from the city's own account books, paid in lead and candles, working by candlelight, bent double in the cold, crawling forward in the dark to find a leak they could hear but not yet see. You will feel their world on your own body. In places the vault brushes your head, in places you bend right over, and in the floor, if you look, you can still see the scar where the lead pipe used to run. Quick honesty note, since I promised. There are old local stories about this place. Buried treasure, ghosts, secret escape routes for besieged citizens. Those are stories. The documented purpose was water. And honestly, water is the better story anyway. Exeter City Council say this is the only city in the UK with underground passages of exactly this kind. You are inside the oldest municipal water system in England that you can still walk through. Not a model of one. The thing itself, Exeter protected water. But a couple of 100 miles of coastline away, other medieval towns were guarding something they could sell, and they built their tunnels to hold it. Entry 8, Chester. Beneath Watergate Street and Bridge Street, Cheshire. Chester sits near the Welsh border, and if you have ever visited, you already know its most famous feature above ground, the Rows, two-tiered medieval galleries running along the main streets. Watergate, Bridge, Eastgate, Northgate, where you can walk a covered upper walkway of shops with a second row of shops down at street level below. There's nothing else quite like it in Britain. But the rows are only the part you can see. Go down a few steps from a modern shop floor and you drop into something older still. Stone-vaulted undercrofts, cut in the 13th and 14th century, tucked beneath the shops that are still trading over your head. According to the Chester Rose records and local heritage surveys, around 20 of these medieval stone undercrofts survive along the rows, several of them properly vaulted. One of the finest, known as Brown's Crypt on Eastgate Street, dates to roughly 1290. These were the strong rooms of rich medieval merchants. Wine, cloth, valuables, built in stone because stone does not burn and stone is hard to break into. And that is what makes Chester land differently from a ruin. You are not looking at a broken wall behind a rope. You are standing under a shop that is still open, still selling things, on the exact two-level medieval plan a merchant laid out 700 years ago. The commerce never stopped, it just got a new sign. Honesty note, nobody is completely certain why Chester built its rows the way it did. This raised, galleried, double-decker street is genuinely unusual, and the truth is that historians still debate it. One popular explanation ties it to the Great Fire that tore through the city in 1278. The idea is that the stone undercrofts were a fireproofing response, a way to keep valuables safe from the next blaze. It is a reasonable theory, it is not a settled fact. So when a guide tells you exactly why the rows exist, enjoy it. But hold it lightly. Chester's merchants kept their wine in stone under the shops. But there was one English port where the wine trade ran so deep that the ground beneath the old town became more hole than rock. Entry 7. Southampton. Beneath the old town, French Street, Simnel Street, Hampshire. Southampton was bombed hard in the Second World War, and at street level parts of it look thoroughly modern. You would not guess what is underneath. Because underneath the old town, Southampton holds the largest number of purpose-built medieval vaults of any town or city in Britain. That is not my flourish. That is Southampton City Council's own description of the site. The reason is one word: wine. Medieval Southampton was a great port, the gateway for wine shipped up from Gascony in what is now southwest France, and the merchants who handled it built stone vaults right beside the quays, under their own houses so they could store the casks and keep one eye on their fortune at all times. The oldest of them, the Castle Vault, is thought to date to around 1180, old enough to connect to a royal wine tax, a place where the king's men could watch the imports come and go. Dozens of these vaults were built. Around 25 survive, and several are open to the public on guided tours that set off from the medieval bar gate. You can climb down a spiral stair that starts in the middle of a modern pavement, into a merchant's cellar off French Street, and stand in the cold where French wine sat 600 years ago, waiting to be sold to the butlers of the aristocracy. And there is a second chapter here, the same one we will keep meeting. During the Blitz, some of these medieval wine vaults were pressed into service as air raid shelters. Same thick stone, same instinct that the people who cut them would have understood at once. When the sky turns dangerous, you go underground, and you let the rock do the rest. No legend to bust here. These are documented, protected, scheduled monuments, and the wine trade that built them is all through the records. Keep it clean, and it is still astonishing. Southampton was a great city that happened to have cellars. The next place is the opposite. A town built cellars first on the direct orders of a king, and then left to shrink quietly into a village, while the cellars stayed exactly where they were. Entry 6. Winchelsea. Beneath Castle Street, East Sussex. Winchelsea. Today is a quiet hilltop village in East Sussex. A few hundred people. A church, a couple of pubs, wide grassy streets. It feels like nothing ever happened here. It was designed to be a city. According to the National Trust and the Winchelsea Archaeological Society, King Edward I founded New Winchelsea in 1288, after the original town of that name was swallowed by the sea. He laid it out deliberately, a planned medieval new town on a grid, meant to be a major port. And under that grid, more than 50 vaulted stone cellars were built. 33 of them still survive today, and the sites of 17 more are known. Most were built in a tight window around 1285 to 1300. Again, the reason was wine, Gascon wine, coming in by ship. Some of the stone for the vaultings thought to have arrived pre-cut from Caen in France, which is about as close as the medieval world got to flat-pack furniture. But Winchelsea has one detail that stops people in their tracks. In the cellar beneath a building known as Blackfriars Barn, which dates from around 1330, there is rare medieval ship graffiti scratched into the stone. A whole little fleet of ships drawn by hand centuries ago. To find one clearly datable medieval ship carved into a wall is significant. To find a wall of them together is essentially unique. And here is the quiet, sad, brilliant thing about Winchelsea. It was meant to be one of the great ports of England. It never got there. The sea pulled back and left it stranded inland. French raiders came. Plague came. The grand town shrank down to the village you see now. But the cellars of a boom town that never actually boomed are still down there under the grass, waiting for ships that stopped coming 700 years ago. Tours run from the town well on Castle Street. One honesty note, because you will hear it. Winchelsea later earned a smuggling reputation, and you will hear these cellars described as smugglers' hideouts. But they were built as medieval wine vaults, centuries before the smuggling era. The smuggling is a much later chapter bolted onto an older room. Say it straight, and both halves stay interesting. So far, every single tunnel was built to hold something. Water, wine, more wine. The next one was dug for what the diggers carried out. The rock itself. Entry 5. Chislehurst. Beneath Old Hill, southeast London. Under the suburb of Chislehurst, in the London borough of Bromley, there are 22 miles of tunnels. 22 miles. If you stretch them into a single line, you could walk from the edge of London deep into the centre and still not reach the end. And every foot of it was cut by hand. The first thing the people who run Chislehurst caves will tell you is that they are not caves. They are a man-made mine, worked for chalk and flint from around the 13th century, right through into the 19th. The first records of it as a working mine go back to roughly 1250. The chalk was burned into lime for the mortar that built London. The flint was used for building and for striking fire. And now the honesty note, the big one. The one this whole video is built to handle properly. If you take a tour of Chislehurst caves, your guide will point out Druid altars and Roman features. And you will hear that the tunnels were dug in 3 neat phases, by Druids, then Romans, then Saxons. It is a spectacular story. It was also essentially invented. According to historians and cavers who have picked it apart, that 3-phase tale traces back to an antiquarian named William Nichols, who published it in the Journal of the British Archaeological Association in 1903. The Druid altars turn out to be miners' working benches, the same kind you find in other chalk mines. The famous Roman well was dug around 1864. There is no real evidence for Druids, Romans, or ceremonial anything down here. It is a chalk mine, a magnificent one, but a mine. And here is the part that needs no invention at all, because it is fully documented. During the First World War, the caves were used as an ammunition store for the Royal Arsenal at Woolwich. In the 1930s, they were turned over to growing mushrooms in the cool dark. And then, when the bombing of London began in September 1940, the tunnels became an underground city, an air raid shelter that at its peak held up to 15,000 people a night, each paying a penny to get in, with its own chapel and even a hospital. A baby was born down here during the war. One more thing your editor will love. In the 20th century, the caves became a music venue. Bands including Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin played gigs underground, and Doctor Who was filmed here. Ignore the Druids, keep the truth. This is a hand-cut medieval mine so deep and so dark that a frightened wartime population moved in and lived inside it. 8 centuries after the first miner swung the first pick. And this is the turn. Everything up to now has been about work. Water, wine, sand, chalk. The medieval working day, frozen in stone. From here down, the tunnels stop being about work, they start being about people, hiding, dying, and at the very bottom, killing for a crown. Here is where the ground shifts. Entry 4, York beneath Fossgate. On a street called Fossgate in York stands one of the finest medieval guild halls in the world, the Merchant Adventurers Hall, built from 1357. Above ground it is already extraordinary, the largest timber frame building in the UK still used for its original purpose. Held together with wooden pegs, its dark beams marked here and there with black scorch left by medieval candles. But go beneath the Great Hall, into the Undercroft, and York does something none of the others on this list do. Because from 1371, this Undercroft was a hospital. According to the Company of Merchant Adventurers, which still owns and uses the building, the Undercroft was set up as an almshouse where the guild cared for the poor and the sick of York. And it went on doing that in one form or another until around 1900. 5 centuries of it. Stand down there and the whole register of this video changes. This is not storage. It is not defence. It is a low, brick-vaulted room where, for hundreds of years, poor and dying people were given a bed, a fire and a prayer by a community that had decided to look after them. The stone that kept wine cool in Southampton kept the dying warm in York. Same idea, cut for mercy instead of money. If you want to feel how thickly York sits on this medieval layer, walk a few minutes to Barley Hall, off Stonegate. Another restored medieval townhouse you can step straight into. The whole city centre is built on rooms like these. And it is all documented. The dates, the charter, the hospital, the guild that still meets there. Right down to the building's Grade 1 listing. No legend required. York's Undercroft was cut for kindness. The next was cut for war. A Norman escape hatch under a castle that has vanished from the skyline so completely that you would never know it was there. Entry 3. Reigate. Beneath the castle grounds, off Tunnel Road / the High Street, Surrey. Walk through Reigate in Surrey, and you would swear there was nothing under your feet but the usual pipes and cables. In fact, a warren of caves runs beneath the town, and the oldest and strangest of them is the Baron's Cave, a vaulted passage cut into the soft sandstone beneath what was once a Norman castle. The castle above is long gone, the passage below is still there, and the honesty note has to come first here, because it is built right into the name. The Baron's Cave is named for a legend, that in 1215, England's rebel barons gathered down here to thrash out the terms of Magna Carta before forcing King John to seal it just up the road at Runnymede. It is a wonderful story, and I would love to tell it to you as fact. But according to the heritage record, it is entirely debunked. There is no evidence the barons ever met in this cave. The name stuck anyway, for the simple reason that a good legend always outlives the correction. You could scrub it off the sign tomorrow, and people would still be calling it the Baron's Cave in 100 years. Strip the myth away though, and the real passage is still remarkable. It is a hand-cut vaulted tunnel driven into the rock beneath a Norman fortress, and the leading interpretation is that it was a sallyport, a hidden way for the castle's defenders to slip out unseen during a siege, or possibly a secure store. Cutting a stone tunnel by hand is expensive, slow work. Nobody does that on a whim. Someone with real authority wanted this, and wanted it badly enough to pay for weeks of digging. The town's other tunnels, the Tunnel Road Caves, are later work, dug as sand mines and as beer and wine stores for local firms, then used to stash explosives in the First World War, and to shelter families in the Second. They are opened on special days by the volunteers of the Wealden Cave and Mine Society, who love the place and will happily tell you the truth about it. Reigate's passage was about slipping out unseen. The last two streets on this list are about slipping in, and the very last is the most dramatic thing that ever happened inside an English tunnel.
Endpoint 2. Nottingham, the city of caves, beneath Garner's Hill.
Nottingham is built on soft sandstone, rock you can carve with hand tools, and beneath the city there are more than 800 man-made caves, the largest concentration of hand-cut caves in the UK. Homes, cellars, workshops, all dug straight into the rock over many centuries. The City of Caves attraction, on Garner's Hill by the old Broadmarsh, and managed by the National Justice Museum, holds the one that genuinely stops people cold. According to the museum and to the Nottingham Caves Survey, this is the only known underground tannery in Britain. A tannery is where animal hides were turned into leather, and it was some of the foulest work the medieval world had to offer. Hides were soaked in pits of water mixed with lime, urine, and dung, scraped clean by hand, then steeped again in tannin from tree bark, a process that could drag on for months. It stank so badly that most towns shoved their tanneries out to the very edge of the settlement. Nottingham, short of space and rich in soft rock, did it underground instead in pits carved into the sandstone. According to the site's records, the oldest chamber here, the Pillar Cave, was first cut around 1250, was blocked by a rockfall by 1400, and was then cleared and fitted out as a tannery around 1500, with circular pits sunk into the floor to hold the barrels. Leather was made down here into the 1600s, and that is exactly why it hits so hard. This is not kings and battles. This is the medieval working day, frozen in stone. The person who scraped hides in that pit went home afterwards, probably stinking, probably exhausted, probably thinking about supper and not about posterity. And here you are, standing in the pit they stood in, 5 centuries later. Honesty note, because Nottingham absolutely drowns in legend. You will hear that Robin Hood hid in these caves, and that a chamber beneath the castle called King David's Dungeon held a captured Scottish king. Robin Hood is a folk hero out of medieval ballads, not the historical record. The cave connection is part of the legend, not evidence, and you should enjoy it as exactly that. The tannery, on the other hand, is real. It is medieval, and it is the only one of its kind in the country. A few hundred metres from that tannery is one more passage, and it is the only place on this entire list where you can stand inside a tunnel and say truthfully, the country changed direction, right here, on one single night, in the dark. Entry 1 Nottingham, Mortimer's Hole. Beneath Castle Rock, from Brewhouse Yard. Everything else on this list has been remarkable. This one is different because this one is a crime scene, and it is the rare case where the dramatic story is not the legend. It is the documented history. Set the scene. The year is 1330. On paper, England is ruled by a teenage king, Edward III. In reality, all the power sits with two people, his mother, Queen Isabella, and her ally, a nobleman named Roger Mortimer. 3 years earlier, Mortimer and Isabella had been at the centre of the overthrow of the previous king, Edward II, Isabella's own husband, who died in captivity, in circumstances people have argued about ever since. Mortimer now ruled England in all but name. He had made himself rich and powerful and widely hated, and the young king, watching all of it, wanted his throne back. The problem was Nottingham Castle, where Mortimer and Isabella were lodged. It was heavily guarded. The gates were sealed and the keys held tight each night, and the garrison answered to Mortimer, not to Edward. Through the front door there was simply no way in. For most kings in most castles, that would have been the end of it. But Nottingham Castle stands on Castle Rock, sandstone, and sandstone, as we now know, has passages. According to the historical accounts of the coup, on a night in October 1330, a small group of the king's loyal men, led by Sir William Montague, were guided up a passage cut through the rock. They came into the castle from below, bypassing the guarded gates entirely, and seized Mortimer in his chamber. Isabella is said to have cried out for her son to spare him. The king did not listen. Mortimer was taken to the Tower of London and executed. Isabella was sent away to Castle Rising in Norfolk, and Edward III began his real reign, a reign that would run for 50 years and make him one of the most powerful kings in English history. From that night forward, the passage they climbed has been called Mortimer's Hole ever since. It runs through the living sandstone, from the castle down to Brewhouse Yard, and you can book a guided tour and walk up it today. Stand in it for a moment and picture the night. No torches. A light would have been seen from the walls, cold rock close on both sides. A handful of armed men climbing in the dark toward a sleeping castle, knowing that if they failed they would die for treason, and that if they succeeded they would change who ruled England. The passage is steep. You feel it in your legs as you go up, and that is the point. It is the same angle they climbed, the same rock under your hand, the same darkness pressing in. Now the careful honesty note, because this is number 1 and it has to be exactly right. The precise passage the conspirators used has been debated by historians. There is more than one candidate tunnel in Castle Rock, and the one now labelled Mortimer's Hole is a traditional identification rather than a proven one. But the event itself, the nighttime coup of October 1330, the seizing of Roger Mortimer inside Nottingham Castle, through a passage in the rock, the beginning of Edward III's true reign. That is documented history, not folklore. The drama here is not the legend, the drama is the fact. And that is why it is number 1. Not because it is the oldest or the longest or the deepest, but because nowhere else on this list can you stand inside a tunnel and say, and mean it, the country turned. Right here, on one silent climb through the dark. The walls of that passage are the last witnesses to the moment, and they have nothing to add. They just stand there, exactly as they stood then, and let you fill in the rest. Why the Middle Ages live under the street? So why is it that medieval Britain survives best underground? Think about what happens up top. A medieval street gets a Tudor frontage, and then a Georgian one, and then a Victorian shopfront, and then plate glass and a chain logo. Every century rebuilds the one before it. The Middle Ages up there gets sanded away, year after year, until almost nothing original is left to touch. The Britain you walk through above ground is layer on layer on layer, each one quietly erasing the one beneath until the oldest writing is simply gone. But a tunnel is invisible. Nobody widened it for carts. Nobody fitted it with sash windows or knocked it through for a car park, because nobody could see it. And most of the time, nobody even remembered it was there. Exeter's water passages, Chester's merchant vaults, Southampton's wine cellars, Winchelsea's boomtown undercrofts, Redcliffe's sand tunnels, Chislehurst's chalk, Norwich's buried street, York's hospital undercroft. Reigate's Norman sallyport, Nottingham's tannery, and Mortimer's hole. Not one of them survived because someone set out to protect it. They survived because they were forgotten. And forgetting down there in the dark turned out to be the gentlest kind of keeping there is. These places are not remarkable because they are old. A ruin is old. A museum case is old. They are remarkable because you can still walk into them. There is no glass between you and the thing, no rope, no sign saying do not touch. The ceiling height is their ceiling height. The damp on the walls is the damp they worked in. You put your hand where a medieval hand went, and for a moment the distance between your century and theirs drops all the way to nothing, and then you climb the steps, and the noise comes back, and the daylight, and the warm modern air, and for one strange second, walking out onto an ordinary shopping street, it is the bright 21st century version of Britain that feels like the set, and the cold, dark thing you just left behind that feels permanently, stubbornly real. If you have ever gone down into a place like this and felt that drop, that exact moment when the present switches off, tell me in the comments which street it was, and which of these 9 you are going to go down into first. I read them, and if this handed you a version of Britain you did not have this morning, subscribe. We spend our time under the surface, digging into the history that everyone else walks straight over on their way to the shops. But the event itself, the nighttime coup of October 1330, the seizing of Roger Mortimer inside Nottingham Castle, through a passage in the rock, the beginning of Edward III's true reign, that is documented history, not folklore. The drama here is not the legend, the drama is the fact. And that is why it is number 1, not because it is the oldest or the longest or the deepest, but because nowhere else on this list can you stand inside a tunnel and say, and mean it, the country turned. Right here, on one silent climb through the dark, the walls of that passage are the last witnesses to the moment, and they have nothing to add. They just stand there, exactly as they stood then, and let you fill in the rest. Why the Middle Ages live under the street? So why is it that medieval Britain survives best underground? Think about what happens up top. A medieval street gets a Tudor frontage, and then a Georgian one, and then a Victorian shopfront, and then plate glass and a chain logo. Every century rebuilds the one before it. The Middle Ages up there gets sanded away, year after year, until almost nothing original is left to touch. The Britain you walk through above ground is layer on layer on layer, each one quietly erasing the one beneath until the oldest writing is simply gone. But a tunnel is invisible. Nobody widened it for carts. Nobody fitted it with sash windows or knocked it through for a car park, because nobody could see it. And most of the time, nobody even remembered it was there. Exeter's water passages, Chester's merchant vaults, Southampton's wine cellars, Winchelsea's boomtown undercrofts, Redcliffe's sand tunnels, Chislehurst's chalk, Norwich's buried street, York's hospital undercroft, Reigate's Norman sallyport, Nottingham's tannery, and Mortimer's hole. Not one of them survived because someone set out to protect it. They survived because they were forgotten. And forgetting down there in the dark turned out to be the gentlest kind of keeping there is. These places are not remarkable because they are old. A ruin is old. A museum case is old. They are remarkable because you can still walk into them. There is no glass between you and the thing, no rope, no sign saying do not touch. The ceiling height is their ceiling height. The damp on the walls is the damp they worked in. You put your hand where a medieval hand went, and for a moment the distance between your century and theirs drops all the way to nothing, and then you climb the steps, and the noise comes back, and the daylight, and the warm modern air, and for one strange second, walking out onto an ordinary shopping street, it is the bright 21st century version of Britain that feels like the set, and the cold, dark thing you just left behind that feels permanently, stubbornly real. If you have ever gone down into a place like this and felt that drop, that exact moment when the present switches off, tell me in the comments which street it was, and which of these 9 you are going to go down into first. I read them, and if this handed you a version of Britain you did not have this morning, subscribe. We spend our time under the surface, digging into the history that everyone else walks straight over on their way to the shops.